The safety is off. There's a round in the chamber. This is Armed Alabama. Sponsored by McCoy Outdoor Company, Mobile's hometown full-line outdoor sporting products and gear store. An interactive talk show discussing self-defense, product reviews, shooting tips, safety, and more. Your calls, comments, and texts welcome at 343-0106. Now, here are your hosts, retired judge and certified NRA instructor Rusty Johnston and certified NRA law enforcement instructor Adam Strange.
They're gonna pry these guns right out of my hands when they come to take them away. I believe in the rights that my fathers gave me when he signed the Constitution that day. No misguided president or crooked politician with a greasy pocket be spared. When the hard-working man gets tired of your cry, it's gonna rain wrath, beware. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. You're not gonna take it away. I stand up to fight for my freedoms and rights. That's the price you'll have to pay. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. Red-blooded to the core. You ain't ever had a fight in your life like the fight that you're itching for.
All right, welcome to Armed Alabama. Glad you could join us tonight. We've got a good show for you tonight. We've got a really good guest here tonight. And if you haven't listened to Armed Alabama, then this is the show all about self-defense, firearm and ammo selection, home protection, concealed carry, training, range etiquette, Alabama law, Mississippi law, and Florida law, and, of course, history. We need to put that in there, whether it be firearm history, history of our rights, history of the law. If you have a comment or a question for us tonight, you can give us a call here at the studio, 251-343-0106. You can call or text to that same number. So we have in the studio with us tonight, we have Paul Bruske. I'd have to say that I've had a few of those, Paul. But glad you're here in the studio with us. Paul wrote a book about the Civil War, in particularly the Civil War pertaining to the battle and the siege that took place here in Mobile. And we will get to him in a few minutes. He's got a lot to share with us and a lot to talk about. Again, if you'd like to call into the studio, especially as Paul talks about his book, you can call us here or text 251-343-0106. And we are also simulcasting on our Facebook page. So if you want to go to your Facebook account, you can look us up on Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. Please like and save and follow. And you can watch us there right now live on Facebook Live. And be sure and shoot us a comment or a question on Facebook Live, and we'll get a chance to listen to those as well. And James Pritchard says, "Hey, Coach."
Oh, no.
So you'll have to call out to him there.
Gotcha.
So if you're listening to Armed Alabama, if you're a regular listener, we ask you to please patron our sponsors, because without them, we would not have this radio show, and we are thankful for those sponsors. And they are Dr. Justin Foster at Foster's Chiropractic, McCoy Outdoors, Ace Hardware Stores, Spring Hill, Crayola, and Moffitt locations, the Law Office of Matt Green, Hanson's Heating and Air, Mike Ward's Liberty Safe, the Steve Moore Law Firm, Hunter Security. If you would like to advertise your business on Armed Alabama, you can give me a call, or better yet, you can email me, adam@armedalabama.com, or the judge at armedalabama.com, or you can give us a call here at the station. Okay, Paul, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. And you have authored a book, The Last Siege, and this on the Civil War, in particularly the siege of Mobile. Right. Is that correct?
It'd be the 1865 siege. It was the last siege of the war between the states, or the Civil War. happened very, very end. Yeah.
So elaborate. Is the last month, the last week, the last year?
Yeah, I mean, it was the last siege of the war. There was actually two battles going on, the Battle of Spanish Fort and Fort Blakely. They were the primary eastern shore defenses. The Federals attacked through Baldwin County versus trying to come from Pascagoula. You got to remember, at that time, Mobile was one of the most heavily fortified cities in the South, in the Confederacy, and they had three lines of huge earthworks surrounding the western approaches to Mobile. So the Union Army decided it might be an easier go to come up the eastern shore from Fort Morgan, and they actually rendezvoused at Fish River. So there was the 16th Army Corps was at Dolphin Island, and they went across by boat, and the 13th Army Corps marched out of Fort Morgan down the peninsula and then up approximately where Highway 59 is, and they both converged at Fish River. From Fish River, they marched north and laid siege first to Spanish Fort. There was also a large column out of Pensacola that went up and cut the rail lines at Pollard, Alabama, and then from there they basically marched on the northern boundary of the Florida state line to Stockton, and from Stockton they came down to and attacked Fort Blakely. And so those were the two battles. That was the key to Mobile. They had to take Spanish Fort and Fort Blakely in order to gain access to the rivers so they could lay siege on Mobile itself. Okay,
Paul, as a track coach, I got to ask you, one is what encouraged you to write a book, and of course, writing a book is one thing, but writing a book on the Civil War, and then of course maybe the last battle here in Mobile, the siege of Mobile.
I've always had an interest in local history, and it wasn't anything in particular about the Civil War, but I think I watched a couple movies on the Civil War, dealing with Gettysburg and I think the weather gods in general, and in those movies I said, well, it's pretty interesting. What happened here? I knew that you had Spanish Fort and you had Blakely, and this was the last fight at Blakely, so I just started looking for stuff on them, and there's been a few books written on them, but not very many. I found there was really a shortage of information on the Mobile campaign. So I just started, reading and researching, and I was having a hard time finding stuff, and I kept digging and digging and digging, collecting and collecting and collecting. I got a lot of old obscure books. I had a lot of newspapers, and I read what was previously written by some other authors. A lot of times you would have something that might be more focused on the Battle of Mobile Bay, but maybe a few chapters that talked a little bit about the subsequent Mobile campaign that happened about 8 months later.
The Battle of Mobile Bay, as in damn the torpedoes.
Right, and that happened about 8 months earlier. And people sometimes confuse the two. Those are two separate operations. Mobile itself did not fall in the Battle of Mobile Bay. The Battle of Mobile Bay sealed Mobile Bay to blockade running, and also gave the Union control of the two forts at the mouth of Mobile Bay. So, and those became the staging grounds, along with Pensacola's Fort Barrancas, became the staging grounds for the siege of Mobile later.
So also you give them they can supply and bring ashore their manpower and so forth until they felt like they were ready to
go. And you got to remember, Hood's army attacked both Nashville and Franklin, and that happened after the Battle of Mobile Bay. And also during the Battle of Mobile Bay, the Atlanta campaign was still going on. So that kind of was their predominant objectives, and Mobile, the capture of Mobile came later.
So I got a text real quick. We've only got 1 minute left, but text real quick is give a timeline here within Lee's surrender.
Okay, the assault of Fort Blakely happened about 3 hours after Lee surrendered. But you got to remember, this was a completely separate department from the Army of Northern Virginia. Just because Lee surrendered didn't mean the war was over, even though it made the chances of the Confederacy being successful very, very unlikely. So.
Yeah, so we've got a few more texts here, and we've got a call that we'll have to get when we come back from the break. So, Kevin, please stay on the line with us, and we will get to you as soon as we come back. And real quick, next text was, why was Mobile worth it?
Well, the reason why Mobile was besieged.
All right, we'll get to it back when we come after this break. Stay tuned with more Armed Alabama and Paul Bruske.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach. So you get what we had here last week, which is the way he wants it. Well, he gets it. And I don't like it any more than you, man.
All right, welcome back to Armed Alabama. We have here in the studio with us Paul Bruske, author of The Last Siege, and this is a book dealing with the Civil War siege of Mobile. So before we go on to some more questions, we have a caller online here, and caller is Kevin from Mobile. Hi, Kevin. Welcome to Armed Alabama.
Hey, how are y'all doing this evening?
Doing well. And your question is about Hall's Mill Camp?
Yes, I was wondering if you knew much about the Hall's Mill camps here in Mobile during the Civil War.
I don't know a lot about Hall's Mill Camp. I actually have a couple friends that are kind of the gurus on that. You know, one of the guys I would recommend is the interpretive ranger out at Blakely State Park, Brian DeRoche. He knows quite a bit about that. But what I would say is there were several Confederate camps around Mobile. I focus a little bit more on Fort Meminger, which would have been approximately where Brookley Field is in that vicinity. That's, I do talk quite a bit about what was going on in that camp in the weeks leading up to the siege.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I was just curious. I had a great-great-great-grandfather in there. I just found out not too long ago, so just trying to do some
yeah, I mean, it definitely was a camp, and actually, I think I know where the location of that is. Behind a, I want to say it's by. Is there a Lowe's out there by Halls Mill Road? Is that right? Or
Highway 90, Tillman's Corner.
Yeah, there's actually some remnants of that camp in that vicinity, and I might have the actual business wrong, but the guy to talk to is Brian over at Historic Blakely Park. He knows quite a bit about that.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your call, Kevin. And just before we went to the break, Paul, there was a text that came in. It was
one below, right there.
It was one below. It said, "Why was Mobile worth the battle?"
Yeah.
So why was?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the big one was the Battle of Mobile Bay. That sealed the bay to blockade running and basically cut Mobile off from the rest of the world, and that was the big one. Okay, but what a lot of people I think have overlooked and haven't pointed out is Mobile still had value as a logistical center because it had access to two major river systems, the Tombigbee and the Alabama River, but also the Mobile and Ohio rail line and the Mobile and Great Northern that went, up to Montgomery and on into Georgia. Hood's invasion of Tennessee in late 1864, one of his chief supply lines was the Mobile and Ohio Railroad. That was still functional. It was transporting supplies and men, and actually after the Battle of Franklin and Nashville, the Mobile and Ohio rail line was used to send reinforcements to Mobile. So if you wanted to end the war, you needed to take Mobile. And now, having said that, Mobile wasn't the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective was to take the state of Alabama was to capture Selma and Montgomery because you had an important munitions foundry, naval foundry at Selma. But you got to remember, the people that were fighting here didn't know the war was about to end. They were still fighting like, the outcome was uncertain. And if you want to take Selma and you want to take Montgomery, you'll need to have a way to supply yourself. And if you take Mobile, now you have access to the rail and river system to transport supplies. Conversely, if you don't take Mobile, now you have an enemy force, a sizable enemy force in your rear that can cut your supply lines.
Sure. So it was very much a strategic value.
Yeah,
to take Mobile.
And you got to remember, the other thing I want to point out is it wasn't General Canby, Edward Canby, was the Union leader of the force that besieged Mobile. It wasn't his idea to attack Mobile. He was ordered to do so by General U.S. Grant, future President U.S. Grant. His orders were simple: take Mobile and hold it. And he, as General-in-Chief, determined Mobile was still an important place to take. And he allocated over 45,000 troops to Canby to take it, not to mention over 20 U.S. Navy vessels were in Mobile Bay. So it was a major military operation, and with a huge disparity in numbers. The Confederates were vastly outnumbered, over 45,000 troops compared to about 9,000 Confederates. So it was a huge disparity. But what I always find remarkable is these Confederates that fought here they didn't give up. They fought hard. And I think the Union, as they were coming into Mobile, they thought that the Confederates were just going to turn around and leave as soon as they showed up. And they were in for a rude awakening because it was a heck of a battle at Spanish Fort. Less than 2,000 men at one point held off a huge, I think the number, it was 10-1 type odds. I might be a little off on that. But they held them off for nearly 2 weeks. In fact, I've read letters where, in fact, there was one letter from the future governor of Minnesota, and he said he estimated the garrison at Spanish Fort to be over 6,000 men. And I said another one that says we think about 15,000 are in Spanish Fort. There was really, at one point there might have been close to 3, but for the most of the time and towards the end there was probably less than 2,000 men inside a Spanish fort that held off a vastly numerically superior force for nearly 2 weeks.
Yeah, so the commanding officers there thought that there was a much larger force.
Right, but by the way they were fighting. And of course, they had the benefit of being behind fairly strong fortifications.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. So was I see that you've got a fan here that's watching us on Facebook Live, and James pretty much says you can't trust him on a live camera. So, so they must know you pretty good.
Yeah, Mr. Pritchard there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about your book. You kind of give us of reasoning why that you are interested, one in Civil War, but also in writing a book. So is the book already out? When does it come out? And how can our listeners purchase the book?
Knock on wood, the book the first batch of books should arrive tomorrow. I hope so, because Thursday I have my first lecture and book signing at Fort Blakely State Park. There was some delays at the printer, but the publisher has assured me that I should receive them tomorrow, and I hope so because, like I said, I have a pretty big event lined up at Historic Blakely Park on Thursday at 6 p.m.
That's this Thursday.
Yes, this Thursday. It's free to the public. It'll be at the Wiley Center, which is located on the grounds of Historic Blakely Park, and I'll be doing a brief lecture followed by a book signing at the Wiley Center at Fort Blakely State Park, and then.
So you'll have plenty to purchase there.
Plenty to purchase there, yeah. And then if you can't make it over to the Eastern Shore, on August 2nd, I'll be back in Mobile, and I'll be doing a book signing at the Oakley Mansion. On Thursday, August 2nd. I'll be doing a talk called Interesting Tidbits about the Mobile campaign. So I'll be talking about a lot of interesting things a lot of people probably didn't know about the Mobile campaign.
Real quick before we go into a break, do you have a website or a Facebook page or anything that has all this information there on your appearances?
I do. If you're interested in the subject, on Facebook we have a closed group page called The History of the Mobile Campaign, and we have lots of local guys and people from out of the area that contribute photos and tidbits about the campaign. We got a tremendous collection of images going back directly related to this campaign. But also we have a YouTube page called the Gulf Coast Civil War Channel, and in it we go around to various locations in the Mobile area and the Gulf Coast in general, historical areas related to the war between the states.
And there's a lot.
There's
a lot to see just within an hour or so drive all around from Mobile.
It's unbelievable the amount of historical locations we have.
All right. Well, we'll be back with more Paul Bruske and Armed Alabama. Stick with us.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
Little pigs, let me come in. Not by the hair on your chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. Here's Johnny.
All right, welcome back to Armed Alabama, and we have in the studio with us Paul Bruske, author of The Last Siege, and this is dealing with one of the last battles of the Civil War, and
the
of course,
siege of the war.
Yeah,
yes.
And of course the siege of Mobile, and got a lot of texts so far, and a lot of messages on Facebook. So you've striked a big interest in people, Paul.
Okay. Good.
And so just before we went to the break, you had mentioned where that you were going to be at some book signings. So please announce that again.
Okay.
And also where our listeners can purchase some books.
Okay. If you're here locally, I'll be coming up this week on Thursday evening, starting at 5:30. Actually, I think the event starts at 6. But you can get there as early as 5:30. I'm going to be doing a book signing and brief lecture at historic Blakely State Park at the Wiley Center there. It's free to the public. On August 2nd, Thursday, August 2nd, at the Oakley Mansion in the Oakley District near Callahan's, we'll be doing a longer lecture on interesting tidbits about this campaign, but that'll be on Thursday, August 2nd at 5:30 p.m., followed by a little get-together, I think, at Callahan's. I think we're going to go there afterwards. So, but those are the two meeting ones. I'm doing a lot of them out of town. I'm doing some talks with some private organizations here in town, but those are the two big ones coming up locally where they can buy the book. Also, the book was available if you're not able to make it to one of the book talks, the local book talks. You can also purchase it on Amazon or through my publisher, Casemate Publishing. It's a military history publishing house.
So they can search on Amazon for
just
the
Last Siege.
The Last Siege.
The Last Siege, the Mobile Campaign, 1865. Yes, sir.
Okay, I've got several texts here, so let me go through. I've got one text is from Mark, is listening in from Huntsville.
Okay.
And it says, what does the author attribute the tremendous force multiplier at Spanish Fort? And so I guess he was referring to
the numbers?
The numbers of Union forces that attacked those encampments.
Right. You have to remember that there was a lot of transferring of troops, some coming down on the Confederate side back and forth. There was a transfer between Blakely and Spanish Fort. But I think there was my book knows this, but I'm having a hard time with my memory there. I think there was about 30,000 troops besieging Spanish Fort at one time or another. And, but again, a lot of these guys were in transit. Some of them were transferred up to Blakely and vice versa. So it's hard to, at any one time, to say how many people were there. But most of the historical signage and interpretive signage will indicate about 10-to-1 odds at Spanish Fort. So, and the numbers kind of are about there. So those are the approximate.
Sure, go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, Paul, I wanted to ask you this. When writing in a historical novel, maybe novel's not the correct word, but first-person accounts of some event is obviously very important.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of soldiers, especially in the Civil War, wrote letters home, kept diaries and things of that sort. First of all, were you able to locate a fair number of those kind of documents? And is there a repository somewhere of Civil War diaries that people can go and research?
Yes, I access several different archives, from both northern and southern sources. I actually have a relative that works for the Minnesota Historical Society, and there were 5 regiments from Minnesota that fought down here, and I actually went up to their museum and saw a gum tree mortar made of a gum tree from Baldwin County that they built on the spot and used to besiege Spanish Fort. It's on display, or actually not in displays, it's in the archives in the vault, and I actually got to see and touch it and hold it and everything. But yeah, as far as the accounts, to answer your question, I went to the Mobile History Museum. I went to they have an archives there. I went through all their files. I also went to the Mobile Genealogical Library. I went to Tulane University archives. I accessed several other different university archives via, email correspondence, and the archivist there would help me out on that.
Talk about loving a job, just reading some of those letters home.
I've got a lot of them from northern.
That had to be enjoyable in itself.
And interesting enough, it was a little bit tougher to find Confederate accounts, although I found a lot, but I had to dig a little bit harder because of the sheer numbers. You got to remember, there was a huge disparity. There was well over 45,000 troops, Union, but less than approximately 9,000 Confederates. So there was just a lot more Union guys than there were Confederates. But I got accounts from both, and I got those from memoirs, private letters, archives, newspaper accounts. So I have a lot of different sources. I think well over 140 contemporary newspaper accounts from around the country. This was big news. You got to remember, at that time, the campaign against Mobile, this was in all the major newspapers in the country. It was page 1 news on New York Times. So it was a big deal. But unfortunately, historically, because of what transpired further east with General Lee's army surrendering, Mobile was overshadowed historically.
Yeah. Is this your first book?
This is my first book.
Yeah.
It's just something I wanted to do. Everybody says, why'd you write a book? You're a track coach. Well, some of my friends can attest to this. You used to not be able to even have a conversation with me if it didn't have something to do with sports or track or football or whatever. And,
well, I've heard
one of my bucket list things was to write a book, so I decided to do it on this.
I've heard, and what a great topic. I've heard it said that everybody has at least one book in them, and it's just a matter of developing that self-discipline to write it and put it together.
Yeah, it kept me out of trouble. I was, I come home from work and I'd go at it, after I got finished with my recruiting and other. My real job tasks, and I would dedicate, just chipping away at it.
So, how long did it take to write it?
Well over 4 years. I honestly, I've lost track, but I know I was working on it as early as 2013, and really informal research even well before that. So,
yeah.
So with your formal research, you had mentioned traveling to different locations. I mean, where all did you have to travel to be able to garner enough information to fill a book and to be able to tell the story about this siege?
Yeah, for example, I think we had a track meet in New Orleans one time. So I went ahead of the team, got there much earlier, and I went to Tulane Archives and spent, a good portion of a day going through the files of the soldiers, some of the officers that were instrumental in the defense of Spanish Fort and Mobile, that had their letters, their personal letters there. So I got a lot of stuff from there. And then a local friend here who was actually going to write a book on the Battle of Spanish Fort, he decided to do something else. So he gave me a lot of his research that he had done from using the local history library. He gave me that and gave me kind of a head start on my research. But I did a lot of research and have a lot of primary sources. In fact, the book is pretty much jam-packed with firsthand accounts from both northern and southern sources.
Any big surprises for you when you were doing this?
A lot of surprises. And I don't want to reveal too much,
And don't give away the plot, but we do know who ultimately won the war.
Right.
Unfortunately.
You think?
But one of the things that really fascinated me was the lives of the men that were here. There were some really exceptional men, both exceptional before the war and did some tremendous things after the war that really contributed to our building our country.
Some of those names are still in Mobile today.
A lot of them. One of the guys that stands out in my mind is Judge Randy Butler's great grandfather, Albert C. Danner. Captain Danner, as he was known. He was with the Missouri Brigade. He came to Mobile to defend Mobile during the siege, and Missouri was pretty much a wasteland. There wasn't much to go back to after the war. He just stayed in Mobile, made a fortune. He was really one of the most prominent, in my opinion, one of the most prominent citizens in Mobile history as far as building the infrastructure of this town. If you look into Judge Butler wrote a book about him recently. Absolutely amazing what Albert Danner did to build Mobile. I mean, he defended it in the war, and then he pretty much built up the city into a pretty prominent place in his lifetime.
And his descendants still here?
Still here, yes, sir.
So if you just now join us, we have in the studio here Paul Bruske, author of The Last Siege, and this is the Siege of Mobile, 1865. And he is going to be at several different locations this week and also in August here in the Mobile area. So we'll definitely give you a chance to talk about that and where you're going to be at in a few minutes. I have a text here, Paul, and we have just a couple minutes left. And I think we already discussed this before, but if you want to give it again, the question is how were the Confederate forces able to mislead the Union forces into thinking that they had 5 times their actual numbers?
They fought like hell.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But there were a lot of other things they did. General Gibson, who was one of the more underrated generals of the war, who commanded the forces, the garrison at Spanish Fort, one of the things he did, a little thing he did was at night he would have his men go around and set campfires where there really wasn't anybody at to make the Unionists think that there was a lot more people. He did little tricks like that to every advantage he could possibly come up with. He tried. I mean, and he had his back against the wall literally because they were vastly outnumbered. But his leadership at Spanish Fort was another thing that stood out to me. This guy was a real leader, and I talk quite a bit about the techniques and motivational methods and leadership he provided to the garrison at Spanish Fort.
All right, so if you have a comment or a question here for Paul regarding his book, now's the time to do it. We still have a little bit left in the show, so you can give us a call here at the studio or text to 251-343-0106, or if you're watching us live on Facebook, you can message us on Facebook Live. We'll be back with Paul Bruske and more Armed Alabama.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
Are you going to pull those pistols or whistle Dixie?
I'm a whistle Dixie.
That would be appropriate, wouldn't it?
Yeah, one of the excerpts from one of my favorite movies of all time, Josie Wales, Outlaw Josie Wales.
Outlaw Josie Wales.
Yeah.
Confederate.
He was.
Yeah.
So appropriate for tonight's discussion. So we have here in the studio with us, you're just now joining us, we have in the studio with us Paul Bruske, and he is author of The Last Siege, and this is the Siege of Mobile, 1865. And if you go to our Facebook page, that's Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. We have posted some links there on our live chat there, and these are links to your YouTube channel and Facebook page. And also, one of the links I posted was the actual the signing that you're doing this week. Now, you've already mentioned it before, but please tell our listeners again for those who are just now joining us.
Yeah, I've got 2 talks in the area that are coming right up. I have several in the near future. In fact, this Saturday I'm going to New Orleans to speak at Memorial Hall there on Camp Street. But locally, Thursday at 6 o'clock at historic Fort Blakely Park, that's on Highway 225 in Spanish Fort, or just slightly north of Spanish Fort. I'll be doing a brief lecture and book signing. And then on Thursday, August 2nd, at the Oakley Mansion in the Oakley District, I'll be doing a talk for the Mobile Historical Society at the mansion there. So that'll be on Thursday, August 2nd at 5:30 p.m. there.
Yes, 2 events you definitely don't want to miss if you're interested in not only the Civil War but history of Mobile. So there's a text that we have here, Paul, and the question is, do you have an Audible copy of the book?
That's a great question. I think there's going to be one that's going to come out eventually, but I do not have that right now. Okay. My publisher is Casemate Publishing. Initially, it's just going to be a hardback copy of it, and I think with time they're going to do a softback or paperback, not softback, and then I think they'll probably do ebook and possibly an
audiobook. Yeah, that would be good because this person stated they're blind, so that would be really good for the vision impaired.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll talk to the publisher about that.
Hey, Paul, if somebody wanted to book you into an appearance like the folks at the Mobile Public Library and places like that, how can they get in touch?
Well, like I said, we have the Facebook group page, the History of the Mobile Campaign. I'm on there. Also, Judge Johnson with the talk show, he knows how to get in touch with me as well. He's not here tonight, but he knows how to access me. And yeah, like I said, I'm the head track coach at the University of South Alabama, so my email address wouldn't be hard to find, but
We'll post a lot of links on our Facebook page, and the judge has already stated that we're going to post a lot of that also on our website, and that is armedalabama.com.
Yeah.
So there'll be plenty of ways, hopefully, for our listeners to be able to look up your appearances and then also be able to purchase your books, which will be able to purchase on Amazon.
It's already on Amazon.
Right.
You can order it now. I don't believe it's going to be actually printed for the general public until, I think, July 25th. But like I said, if you're here locally and you want to get a copy, come on out to historic Blakely Park on Thursday evening, and I'll be there, and I'll hope I have enough copies, for everybody. But
well, I hope you do, especially if they come out. But I'm sure it'd be a great opportunity to listen to the wealth of knowledge you have about this subject, and which spurred you to write a book.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
It's really, I've enjoyed researching it, and I hope people will enjoy reading it as much as I've enjoyed researching it, because I had a lot of fun looking this stuff up. I see that David Preston is giving me grief there.
I see that.
Said that I can read the book to the
Well, I had one other thought just now, too. How did you end the book? Did it end at that when that specific battle was over?
No. In fact, and that's one of the things I think makes my book a little bit differently. I go into a lot of detail. There's a lot of stuff that happened between April 9th, the fall of Blakely, and Mobile evacuated over the next 2 days, but they didn't surrender. There was an armistice meeting at McGee Farm, which is just north of Mobile at Whistler, and then the actual surrender didn't happen in Centinel until the first week of May 4th. So there's a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of interesting stuff that happened between April 9th and May 4th.
I think there's a memorial or something for that surrender at Citronelle today.
There is.
I don't know if it's a train station or
yeah,
a train
it was.
car.
It's no longer there. There was a train station that was right in front of where they surrendered under the surrender oak. That tree has actually been chopped down, but the location's still there, and it used to be along the rail line of the Mobile and Ohio Railroad, but no longer.
Yeah.
But there, and that's something I always interested in some obscure things. I wanted to know what was going on right before the battle. And where did these guys come from? And where did they go after they left Mobile, after they evacuated the city? And I found a lot of interesting stuff, and I talk about that in a lot of detail. There's a lot of interesting stuff that happened. And there was actually, even after the Battle of Blakely, there was a skirmish at Whistler. A lot of people don't know that. There was a cavalry skirmish. That was really one of the last fights of the Civil War. Not the last fight, but one of the last fights. And it was the last fight of the Mobile campaign. And there was people that were killed there. And that's just right there off Rebel Road in Whistler.
What about that? That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of little tidbits that's in your book.
Yeah,
So by all means, if you're interested within the history of Mobile, then definitely you need to get out and check out Paul's book. We have a caller here, Paul.
We got about a minute.
Okay, 1 minute left, real quick.
Won't take but a minute.
Hey, welcome to Armed Alabama.
When are you going to be at Blakely Forest?
Say it one more time.
When are you going to be at Blakely Forest for your book signing?
Yeah, that'll be this Thursday. It starts at 5:30 p.m. It'll be open. The actual signing, the lecture will start at 6 p.m., but they open the gates for free at Historic Blakely Park on Thursday evening at 5:30 p.m. And the actual book signing and lecture will be at 6 p.m. at the Wiley Center at Historic Blakely Park.
Well, look, I'm off that night. All right, thank you.
Yep, great.
All right, thank
Hope
you
to
for
see
calling,
there.
LD. All right, we just got a few minutes left of the show. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming in and joining us. I really learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to reading your book.
Wonderful.
And so if you listen to Armed Alabama, please patron our advertisers, and those are Dr. Justin Foster's at Foster's Chiropractic, McCoy Outdoors, of course. They have all your outdoor equipment needs, and be sure to tell them that Armed Alabama sent you. Check out Ace Hardware Stores, Spring Hill, Creola, and Moffitt locations, Law Office of Matt Green, Hanson's Heating and Air, Mike Ward's Liberty Safe, and Hunter Security. Join us next week for more Armed Alabama.